suffer. So there was serious market chaos. And according to the United Nations World Food Program, by the end of 2020, 265 they're going into Russia and producing soybean for themselves and discussing to build a soybean processing plant in Russia with an annual output of 240 inside your country. And at some point people can't buy these expensive goods if you don't have comparative advantage and you insist on producing them. Less in-time inventory and more stockpiling and controlled agriculture, because they saw that how fragile the in-time inventory is, like that market in China we saw, or in the US markets. Less small farm agriculture. These all would lead us to less small farm agriculture and more commercial corporate farms, that have more resilient production and marketing systems, that they're not going to just fall over because of every disease or every risk or every bad news. Less human workers and more robots.
Trade and free trade, it has been declined. International trade and international economics seems to be, have a bumble way of moving before, nationalism and protectionism, coming in. But bad enough, we still have the other thing, a huge impact to human beings.
One reason was we had surplus here and for humanitarian reasons. So we were getting rid of our surplus and also helping other countries. But then there was research at that time showing, would it be better if we paid them cash so they can buy their local food rather than giving them the food that some of the governments who were corrupt or importers that were corruption in there, you didn't know, the food not always ended up to the poor. So, humanitarian reason, we got to help other people. We got to help. Surplus countries have to help. And they have been doing that, especially, US, we have now food. We have had the Food for Peace program. I don't know how big it is right now, but.
Okay. That's okay, Professor. Please introduce yourself a little bit, and that's what the handle.
Right. Okay. I'm Rosalyn. I'm the professor, and I'm teaching at the Faculty of Economics at the moment. So I've got two questions for you. The first question is, you mentioned in your presentation that there are a number of restrictions on agricultural products, especially in the developing countries. They're trying to ban on export, right? You say that a number of countries prevent the food from being exported. So do you think this is the right time? I mean, during the crisis and also the post-crisis like this, is it the right time that the country, especially for the developing countries like us, to focus on domestic trade rather than just depending on export, something like that? That's the first question.
That's an excellent question. Whether export protection or they're imposing export quotas and export taxes. So what are they doing by having the products not leave their country? They bring the food prices down. Mm-hmm. But we saw in Argentina several years ago that, I don't know if you remember those images of the farmers driving their tractors from their farms to Buenos Aires to protest against that policy, because that basically takes the farm prices go down, commodity prices go down when you don't let it sell abroad, and that deteriorates your own domestic agriculture. So, and some of that was political, because at that time, Argentina, that's now way before COVID, Argentina's government wanted popularity, and then, where are the votes? The votes are in urban areas. So you try to keep the food prices down in urban areas at the cost of the farmers, because that's where your votes are. Mm-hmm. And again, in Argentina, Eva Perón, you saw her, like I used to go to Argentina a lot because I had study abroad courses there. And they would say, for example, she would come, I don't know how true it is, but I heard that she was very popular among the poor. But they would say she would go to a factory that made sheets and towels, and we say, by tomorrow I want 3,000 towels and sheets for these orphanage houses, you know. So it would make the government popular, but that factory that had to produce them, it might not have been as popular.
Exactly.
With them. So it's that entrepreneurship is, the producers versus the consumers.
Right, I do agree with you. Right, so move on to the second question. As I remember, I think that more than 150 countries are now being members of WTO, a World Trade Organization.
Yes.
So then, over the past few months, WTO has been attracted by medias and also the country's members in its role of international trade on post-COVID-19. So in your opinion, what do you think about the role of WTO? I mean, if the situation of the COVID-19 gets better, and then what should be done by the WTO?
Well, WTO plays a very important role. However, before it was the big powers in the world that would sit around the table, like US was a leader, it led, a lot of those negotiations. But the US has lost that. And, there are no leaders really, there are countries equally and trying to negotiate. And they don't always, and they threaten to leave WTO. So it's not the end solution. And we saw that several years ago again, how the US domestic policies were punished in the WTO courts on, I believe it was our cotton policy, that Brazil took the US to the courts and said that you are subsidizing your cotton, so we cannot compete. And Pakistan, which is a developing country, also said we can't produce cotton. You're hurting our industries because your prices are so much lower. It brings the world prices down. So WTO does play a very important role in these, but they gotta have. They have to maintain leadership and negotiation and effectiveness.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we have time running out.
Used to be also that I was also concerning about food security a lot. So this regard, nowadays this protectionism, nationalism, whatever, we try to making a much more interdependent world. Unfortunately, now it's not. And so I'm worried about also the food security. But just also that I will.
Okay, all right.
Okay, today I would like to talk about, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to deliver this speech and discuss with colleagues in Thailand and also the student. This opportunity, it is very great for me. And today the theme is forging a different path, meaning is a kind of creating new different paths. I'm worried about nowadays so-called neoliberal free market system. It is making a very